This is the story of the Vikings, the fierce seafarers who carved their legend into the bones of Europe and beyond. For nearly 3 centuries, their longships struck terror into kingdoms, their axes shattered armies, and their courage pushed them across oceans no one else dared to cross. But the tale of the Vikings is not just one of blood and fire. It is a saga of discovery, ambition, and survival. From the icy fjords of Scandinavia to the golden halls of Constantinople, from the frozen shores of Greenland to the mysterious lands of North America, the Vikings left behind a legacy that shaped the very foundations of our world. This story will take you deep into their voyages, battles, and beliefs. It will reveal how ordinary farmers became raiders, how outlaws became kings, and how wanderers became the first Europeans to set foot in the New World. The Viking Age was more than history. It was an age of fire, shadow, and endless horizons. The Viking Age began in the late 8th century, a time when the icy seas of Scandinavia birthed some of the most daring sailors in history. Born among fjords, forests, and long winters, the Norse people carved out lives through farming, hunting, and fishing. But their land was harsh, resources limited, and ambition endless. The first recorded Viking raid took place in 793 AD, when warriors in longships descended upon the monastery of Lindisfarne on the English coast. Monks were slaughtered, treasures taken, and the sacred church burned. To the Christian world, it seemed as if demons had risen from the sea. To the Vikings, it was only the beginning. Longships became the heart of their power. With shallow keels and strong frames, they could cross stormy oceans yet glide up rivers into the heart of kingdoms. This gave the Vikings an advantage no European army could predict. No village, town, or monastery along the coasts or waterways was safe from their reach. As news of their raid spread, fear gripped Europe. Kings prayed, peasants hid, and monasteries fortified their walls. Yet, despite their terror, many could not resist the sheer wealth that came from raiding. Gold, silver, and slaves poured back into Scandinavia. The Norse realized that beyond the sea lay not only treasure, but destiny. By the early 9th century, Viking raids stretched across England, Ireland, and the coasts of modern-day France. Some expeditions struck deep inland, navigating rivers like the Seine and the Loire. For many rulers, the Viking threat became an unstoppable storm, arriving suddenly, leaving ruins and vanishing with the tide. But the Vikings were not merely raiders. They were explorers, traders, and settlers. Behind every raid came opportunities to build, to stay, and to carve out new lives. Their journeys would soon carry them farther than anyone in medieval Europe dared to dream. By the mid-9th century, Viking expeditions grew larger and more ambitious. No longer were they small groups of raiders, they became full fleets, sometimes numbering hundreds of ships. These were not mere pirates but armies from the sea, striking fear into kingdoms and even empires. Ireland became one of their key targets. Dublin, once a simple settlement, was transformed into a Viking stronghold and trading hub. From here, they launched raids across the British Isles, capturing slaves and controlling trade routes. Viking kings ruled parts of Ireland for centuries, weaving their bloodlines into the land. Across the Channel, Frankish lands suffered deeply. The Vikings sailed up the Seine and besieged Paris multiple times. In 845 AD, Ragnar Lothbrok himself, or so the sagas claim, led a fleet of 120 ships to Paris, demanding ransom. The Frankish king paid a fortune in silver to make them leave. But peace never lasted long. Villages burned, monasteries looted, and churches desecrated. The Vikings struck with a fury that left chroniclers describing them as God's punishment upon the Christians. But at the same time, they brought connections. Goods, slaves, and even technology flowed along their routes, linking the north to the heart of Europe. Some Vikings chose to settle rather than raid. They founded colonies along the rivers, intermarried with locals, and established new identities. The most famous of these would later become Normandy, the land of the Northmen. Here, Viking descendants would rise to power, and one of them, William the Conqueror, would change the course of English history forever. But the hunger for exploration did not stop at Europe's coasts. Beyond the horizon, greater worlds awaited, the icy lands of the north, the vast steppes of the east, and even the unknown shores of the west. The Viking Age was only just beginning. As the 9th century turned into the 10th, Viking ambitions expanded beyond raiding and ransom. The same ships that terrorized Europe also carried families, livestock, and dreams of new beginnings. The Norse became not only warriors but settlers, pushing into lands unknown. Iceland became one of their greatest colonies. Rugged, volcanic, and isolated, it was transformed into a thriving Norse society. Here, chieftains built halls, poets composed sagas, and assemblies called Althings created one of the earliest forms of democracy. Iceland stood as a beacon of Norse culture, a society born entirely from seafaring ambition. From Iceland, the bravest pushed farther west. Eric the Red, exiled for murder, led his followers to the frozen land of Greenland. Though harsh, it provided farms, hunting, and a new base for exploration. Generations of Norsemen lived there, carving out a life at the edge of the known world. But the greatest voyage of all came with Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red. Around the year 1000, Leif and his crew crossed the Atlantic and reached a land rich with timber, grapes, and game. They called it Vinland, the land of wine. Today, historians believe this was part of North America, likely Newfoundland. This made the Vikings the first Europeans to set foot on American soil, 5 centuries before Columbus. They built shelters, traded with indigenous peoples, and dreamed of expansion. But conflict, distance, and isolation made the settlement short-lived. Still, the Norse had crossed an ocean no one else dared to. While Western voyages captured imaginations, the Vikings also turned east. Through the rivers of Russia, Norse adventurers known as Varangians created trade routes that linked the Baltic to Byzantium. They founded cities like Novgorod and Kiev, laying the foundations for states that would shape Eastern Europe. Some of these warriors entered the service of the Byzantine emperors. Known as the Varangian Guard, they were famed for loyalty and ferocity. In Constantinople, far from frozen fjords, Vikings stood as elite bodyguards in the richest empire of their time. The Viking world was no longer limited to raids. It stretched from North America to Asia, from Greenland's ice to the palaces of Constantinople. Yet, even as their power spread, change was coming. By the 11th century, the Viking Age reached its height, but also its decline. Europe was changing, and the Norse could not escape that transformation. Christianity spread through Scandinavia, replacing old gods with new faith. Kings sought power not through raiding but through kingdoms and laws. Raids became harder as European rulers grew stronger. Castles and fortified towns replaced vulnerable villages. Standing armies, cavalry, and organized defenses blunted Viking attacks. What once had been easy plunder now required costly campaigns. The last great wave of Viking invasions struck England in the 11th century. Armies led by kings like Sweyn Forkbeard and Nut the Great conquered large parts of the land, creating the North Sea Empire. For a time, England was ruled not by Anglo-Saxon kings, but by Norse conquerors. Yet, even this empire could not last. In 1066, one of the final great Viking armies, led by Harald Hardrada, invaded England. At the Battle of Stamford Bridge, they met a fierce Anglo-Saxon force. The battle was brutal, and Harald was slain. It marked the symbolic end of the Viking Age of conquest. Ironically, just weeks later, another descendant of the Vikings, William of Normandy, launched his own invasion of England. He won at the Battle of Hastings and became king, forever changing the island's history. The legacy of the Norse lived on, even as their raiding days ended. Though their age of fire and blood had passed, the Vikings left a mark no one could erase. They reshaped maps, founded cities, and influenced kingdoms. Their sagas, gods, and runes inspired generations. And their spirit of exploration carried humanity farther than anyone before them. The Viking Age was not just about raids and war, it was about daring to push beyond the horizon, to risk everything in search of wealth, glory, and survival. Their story is one of both terror and wonder, a saga of a people who refused to be bound by the land they were born in. And even today, when we speak of adventurers, explorers, or warriors who challenge the unknown, the shadow of the Vikings sails with them, eternal as the sea.